This is a perfect example of the intolerance here at Chapel Hill. This guy is intolerant of the preaching of the Bible. This is an example of the hatred and the hostility that Chapel Hill is breeding amongst young people today towards the Bible and the things of God. So if God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, because there were cities full of sodomites, why do we tolerate homosexuality in America? Why do we tolerate sodomy in America? Why? It's not reasonable, it's not logical, it's not biblical. It's really idiotic to abuse your body that way. It's really not wise. You know, most homosexuals don't live past the age of 40 years old. They die of HIV and AIDS. They get some other STD. You know, after you sodomize your rear end so much, of course, God created your body. God knows what your body's for. How many of you want a bright future of HIV, a wonderful future of AIDS, an eternity of hell? Is that what you want for your life? That's not what God wants for your life. That's not what God planned for you. God cares about you. He cares about your body. He cares about your soul. God cares about your eternity. If God gives you a law, it's because what He's outlawing is harmful. Drunkenness, lying, stealing, murder, rape, lust, adultery. These things are harmful one way or another. So God outlaws it. And isn't that the purpose of laws? To protect the community? That's what laws are designed for. God gave us laws to protect the community. He says, don't be a homosexual. God says, don't be a fornicator. Don't be a drunkard. God says, don't be a whore. God says, don't do these things. Why? Because they're harmful to you. They're harmful to everyone. They're harmful to your family, to your kids, to your society, to your country. You have sin in your life. You need to get rid of it, or you can't go to heaven.
He's a sinner. That guy right there, Blue's a sinner. Right there.
What's he up to? What's he doing?
I seen him being drunker.
Not a fear of God.
That's a shame.
Oh, you'll believe it when you're cast into hell. You'll believe it. Everybody in hell believes in God. There's no atheists in hell. There's no agnostics in hell. When God judges your life, when He looks at all that you've done, and He judges every last sin that you've ever committed, all the times that you refuse to do what you do is right.
I just want to say there's so much evil in the world. If God was really holy, good, and omnipotent, why does He let it exist? Well, you got babies being born with abnormalities and disabilities. They're not sinners. God's still allowed them. He's omnipotent. He should be able to allow them not to.
Well, if there's no God, then evil cannot exist at all. There can only be good if there's a God. But if there's no universal laws, there's not a design of nature of things, then there really can't be any evil. So the fact that you acknowledge evil shows that you must acknowledge that there's a God. But you might not like how He does business. But He allows temptation. He allows sin. Because that way we can develop our own moral character. You know, God gave us a free will. That way we could of our own selves choose good or evil. We have the power to create our own moral character. Every temptation to sin is an opportunity to be holy. We couldn't be holy if we didn't have the opportunity to sin. You can't make someone holy. You can't make someone sinful. Those are free will choices. So yes, God sort of allows, it's a lesser of two evils. Either nobody has a free will, we're all robots, puppets, and zombies, and machines, or God lets us have a free will, but with that comes the risk that we're going to use it wrong. with the free will, there's a risk. God took a risk. When you have a kid, you're taking a risk that he might grow up to be a drug dealer. He might grow up to be an Adolf Hitler. But that's a risk worth taking. All parents take that risk when they bring a child into the world. God brought mankind into the universe, and he took a big risk. We could do all sorts of evil, or we could do all sorts of good. And God thought that the opportunity, the possibility that we would do good far outweighs the possibility that we would do evil. So, I mean, God's really just like a parent, taking a risk. He doesn't want us to do bad. He doesn't want us to sin. He wants us to do good. He wants us to choose rightly, to use our free will like he uses his free will, to be holy. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But like I said, babies born with disabilities, they're not sinners. But they're still being punished, just like a sinner would be punished. Why does God allow that to happen?
Well, I mean, that's the nature of things. When sin comes into the world, there's natural consequences. Doesn't mean it's a punishment. It's simply a natural consequence. And that's why God's against sin anyways, because he wants to avoid those. Still in the garden, there'd be no disease, there'd be no death. But now that when Adam was kicked out of the garden, all of mankind was kicked out. And this is just a probationary period. But because of that, because of his sin, there's death, and disease, and all sorts of stuff. But in the world to come, there's going to be the tree of life. That's what was in the garden, the tree of life. But that was taken away. We can't be trusted. But if we live holy and pure and obey Jesus and come to Jesus in this life, God will let us access that tree in the next life. We'll live forever. There'll be no disease in heaven, no death in heaven. But the fact that there is disease and that there is death shows that man is in rebellion against God's plan. God didn't plan death. God didn't plan disease. God wanted us to be happy and holy in a relationship with him. But when man sinned, that brought a separation between God and man. That brought terrible consequences of being kicked out of the garden. And that brought all sorts of disasters into the universe and into the world. But God, that's not God's original plan. That's why Jesus came, to bring us back to God's plan. Jesus came to restore and to salvage the fallen world. And the Bible promises Christians a glorified body, a body that's not subjected to death, a body that's not subjected to disease, a restoration back to God's original plan. Just as evil exists doesn't mean that's God's plan. God's not responsible. Adam is responsible. We are responsible. We choose our own sin. We choose, and our sin affects other people. And it keeps spreading and spreading and spreading. And the influence never stops.
So, but God originally created the garden with no evil until Adam sinned, correct? So it's reasonable to believe that he didn't want evil in the world. But he's still omnipotent, omniscient, and everything.
Like I said, he could either make us all robots and machines, or he could make us free will beings. And he thought it was better for us to be free will moral agents rather than to...
But do we really have free will if he's omniscient?
Our free will choices aren't determined yet. They're foreknown by God as possibilities. But until you determine it, it's not known as a certainty. So the fall of man was foreknown by God as a possibility. It was not settled, it was not determined until Adam determined it. Until Adam and Eve determined it. So, an object of knowledge is, anything that is either possible or anything that's settled. Anything God's determined is settled. Anything God lets us determine is still open. So God knows our possible, it's like a chess play. All the possible moves, all the possible outcomes. But there's still free will. So, it's not like the whole future is all determined yet. God knows what it could be. God knows what it will probably be. God knows what it will, what He's determined it to be. But our free will choices are only foreknown as possibilities. Yeah, even with omniscience, there's still a free will, and even with omnipotence, God is all powerful, but He doesn't force everything. In His omnipotence, He's given us a free will. In His omnipotence, He's given us the power of choice. But with that comes the risk. We're going to do what He doesn't want us to do. That's what sin is. Sin is doing what God doesn't want us. Repentance is when we are restored. We submit to Him. We say whatever He wants.
You're foolish. You're literally foolish.
And I mean, I heard the free will, the robot thing, but I don't know if he was talking about it because you were talking about the whole.
Why is there pain and suffering?
Not so much. No, I was wondering if he asked you whether you thought there was like free will in heaven.
Oh, free will, I do, yeah.
But if there's free will in heaven and there's no suffering in heaven,
Right.
then I guess God can clearly pull off that balance somewhere.
Well,
so,
I mean, God, the only people God lets into heaven are people that choose in this life to serve Him.
I understand. I'm just saying that if the real conflict was that, He can't make the world have free will and no suffering if He wanted to end suffering now just to be nice. However, obviously He can pull it off if He's doing it.
Well, the problem's not really with the free will faculty, it's with the usage of it. And the problem is that people at the fall, Adam started using his free will wrongly, and in this life people are still using it
Yeah,
wrong.
but I mean, no, I know. I was just saying, but that would kind of make it like deliberately right now, whether to punish people or whatever, it would be He's deliberately withholding the part where He could just stop people from dying horrible deaths all the time, if He wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, he could stop the whole universe, and we could have Judgment Day today if we wanted to. He thinks it's worth the risk that there's more people that are going to choose to love Him, choose to love each other, and love must be voluntary. Love must be a choice of the will. And so, sure, I mean, God could stop all the death, all the suffering, all of it right now, but then it wouldn't really be what He wants is people that choose to love. And that's
I understand that. But
Now, that's just the science